All right, Shea, thanks for joining us. Tell us where you're calling in from today.
Jeremy, I am calling in from Columbus, Ohio, but I work in the greater Chicago area for a company called GC Realty and Development.
Great. And how long have you been with GC?
I've been with GC for approaching 2 years, about 20 months at this point.
Okay, great. And you are in Columbus, that's where you live now. How long were you in your local market of Chicago before you moved to Columbus?
So I was in Chicago for about 16 months, working in the office for GC, doing a lot of on-site stuff with the team and with prospective clients. Before my wife and I had a baby and made the decision to move to Columbus to be a little bit closer to family. And I was fortunate enough to be able to stay on in the same role in a fully remote capacity.
And if I understand this right, you do go back to Chicago quite a bit, correct?
Yeah, I try to make it back up there. The owner of GC, Mark, and myself try to plan it around specific events in the city. And if possible, try to lump in specific client visits during that time. So, for example, I just went probably 2 weeks ago. We had one of Mark's in person events that I got to attend. And then I also met with a client that had a handful of single family homes in the western suburbs at the same time.
Great. And walk us through what you were doing before you came to GC and how you found GC Realty, which I heard is a pretty good story. So kind of walk
Yeah.
us through what you were doing before, your background just briefly, and what led you where you are.
Yeah. So before GC, I was playing baseball professionally. So I went to Ohio State. I was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates out of Ohio State. And I worked my way through their farm system for about 5 years. So that was from 2017 to 2022. It started to get to the point where I could see the writing on the wall. I did not know if my career was going to be as a Major League Baseball player forever or period. And so I started to look at different avenues. Now, during those seasons that I was playing, if you know anything about minor league baseball, you do not make very much money doing that. So anytime the off season hits, you got to jump into an off season job. At the beginning, for me, I was trying to how can I basically pay for my training and gym and all that stuff while also making some money. So I took a job selling personal training at a fitness center in Chicago. I did that for the first two off seasons, and that was kind of my introduction to sales, understanding a huge variety of people, talking to people from pretty diverse city in the grand scheme of things. And then in the 2020 year, I decided to take a job in the off season with a health insurance brokerage that was exclusively phone sales in downtown Chicago. Basically, what I was trying to do was make enough money so that I could buy a ring and propose to my girlfriend at the time. Check, I accomplished the goal, but it was also a great introduction to being uncomfortable on the phone, cold calling people, trying to understand the flow and vibes of those conversations. And then you mix that kind of unique combination of off-season jobs with playing baseball professionally. So for 6 months of the year, you're doing this thing. 6 months of the year, you're trying to compete with some of the best athletes in the world in sort of a dog-eat-dog world. That is sort of the background or foundation of my time in sales. Fast forward to 2022 summer, I really felt like there was a high ceiling in the real estate investment world. I really enjoyed listening to the podcast Bigger Pockets. But I started to think I want something a little bit more localized. And that's when I found the podcast Straight Up Chicago Investor, which was founded by Mark Ainley, who is the owner of GC Realty. I loved it. I thought I got to figure out how I can go work from this guy. He seems to know what he's talking about. So I cold LinkedIn DM'd him and said, hey, I don't know if you have any positions available for me, but I want to come work for you. I love I love the podcast, and I feel like I can add to whatever you're doing in the sales department. And then kind of the rest is history. He said, let's get on a call. And it was at the same time that he was sort of trying to move out of the BDM seat with GC. So, and actually, like the time that he wanted to interview in person, I was still playing, and we had a flight going down to Texas. And I told my coach that I was skipping the flight, and I bought my own flight so that I could be in the office at GC that Monday morning to have the conversation with Mark. Then he hired me, and then, here we are 2 years later. So that's kind of the background and how I got to GC.
I love it. That's great. I didn't know the story about the flight. I appreciate the bold action. We're a big believer in that here. That's fantastic. So it seems like it worked out. So we've got our scoreboard and we publish results every month and constantly see you on the top of the scoreboard. And whenever we don't, I hear Mark is always, basically like poking you. And I know you don't have to use exact numbers, but I think just general scale is important for the readers or the listeners. What's kind of an average door month for you, or how does it fluctuate? Like, what's a range? Like, what have you been acquiring since you came on?
Yeah, I would say well, it's changed a little bit year over year. So last year we had a little bit heavier of a focus on larger multifamily. And for a variety of company reasons, we've started to try to pivot a little bit more into single family homes or small multifamily. So last year, I would say an average month door count would be on the low end, maybe 15 to 20 doors. On the high end would be maybe like 35 to 50 doors. That was last year. This year, I would say I'm more focused on deals done. So I'd say a low month this year looks something like maybe 10-ish owners, new owners or deals done. And a higher end would be maybe 25 to 30 doors or deals done.
These are great numbers either way, and I appreciate that breakdown of kind of why it maybe has gone down, not necessarily a performance, but a shift of focus, and that's really important.
Well, and just to jump in, that's not, I hate the idea of hedging my bet or trying to, like get it out of me. Like I have very high expectations for myself, and I do want to take ownership over not being to my goal for this year based on my numbers from last year. But there was a pivot in terms of the types of properties that we're trying to bring on board. So that just to put an asterisk on it, there are things that I could be doing better to bring in more doors.
I appreciate the self-accountability, and I do agree, but I also do know, it's a 12-door building may take just as much work to sell as two single-family home portfolio. So I get that. The numbers just show up a little differently. But regardless, knowing what we worked with your company for several years before you even came on. And, one of the things that we've just seen is you guys have this fantastic volume of leads, which everybody listening is probably like, oh, lucky you guys. But leads don't always just call you on a Tuesday and buy on a Wednesday. They take time, they take effort, they take follow-up. It creates noise in our life that we have to manage. And so one of the things that I've seen is that you've done a pretty solid job of managing all this lead volume without, just taking the cherry on top or the icing on the top of the cake, but you've actually followed through with all that. So kind of share anything you want to share with us about how you're able to handle this lead flow and make sure that you're doing the best you can to create a sales experience for everybody that comes through.
For sure. I think that the lead volume, especially the nature of the type of funnel that is created by Mark and by GC and by myself, is a lot longer term than you might traditionally think of for property management. So the podcast or resources on the website or ebooks, a lot of times these are, especially in Chicago, people who are trying to get into real estate investing or are trying to understand, oh, in a couple of years, what is this going to look like? Or even resources for self-managers. We want to try to teach them as much as we can how to manage on their own, because we recognize the difficulty of property management as a whole, and we want to be top of mind when they do ultimately make that jump. So that is a large volume of those types of people. And so trying to add value to them, even after they've come into a system with no desire to actually hire a property manager, creates kind of more of like a 6-month, 1-year, 2-year type pipeline that has a compounding interest effect over the course of the years. So managing those is a lot different from a time management perspective than the people that come in from SEO looking to hire now. Hey, in the next 30, 60, 90 days, I want to have a property manager in place. So that's kind of the first part, just separating the type of person it is from initial point of contact. When it comes in, if they've downloaded an ebook, or whether it comes in and they're ready to hire somebody right now, either way, I want a speed to lead mentality. Like, how quickly can I get a hold of this person? How quickly can I appear or perceive accessible? Because I want them to feel like they can pick up the phone and call me. But after that, the next steps in the drip or the next steps in my follow-up are going to be determined kind of by the type of lead. So once you get those two separated, we call it opportunities versus not opportunities. If it's within 90 days closable, then it's an opportunity. My attention pivots very heavily to those 90-day opportunities. And at that point, it is a consistent hammering them with calls, hammering them with texts, and then using the automated system in the CRM to add value without obviously having to do it myself manually very frequently, especially in the first, I would say, 21 days.
So elaborate on that for me. So I like to use the term semi-automation, which is helping you stay on top of tasks, send some basic stuff, but not completely surrender or abdicate the lead to just the technology. So anything you can share about that? Like what do you say you use the CRM? What do you mean by that? Like what are you doing versus what is the CRM doing? What's a typical follow-up look like if I pop into your funnel on Tuesday, September, and like, how would you follow up with me over the next several weeks?
Yeah, so right when you pop in, I want to make sure that I'm on the phone or texting or email. I got to make some point of contact because then it's going to start to illustrate the type of funnel that I want to put you in. We try to be very specific. We have funnels for every single different lead source, so it's specific to that type of situation. If I know that there's going to be a time where I want to follow back up with you sooner than what the drip might dictate, I'm just going to put a manual task in there. Now, and that's part of the semi-automation piece of it. So I can just quickly have the conversation, put a small note in there, and then add a task to follow up in 2 days because I know Jeremy's hot to trot. I think that there's the automated drip portion of it that has those auto calls and auto emails without sending it automatically. So it's already the template that's sitting in Lead Simple or whatever CRM you use. I just got to theoretically click on it, but I don't do that. I mean, when it comes up in my task list, I click on it. This is the gist of the type of information I want to send them. Make it a little bit personalized, send it. And it may take 20 additional seconds, but it probably increases the probability of conversion by many standard deviations. So
amazing. I love that. I'm constantly weighing in my mind effectiveness versus efficiency. And you don't want to optimize for either 100%. Like you don't want to do everything manually because it's not very efficient. But if you do everything to the absolute level of efficiency, and you don't add those 20 seconds or, hey, I'm going to skip this and I'm actually going to call them because that's what I think they need right now, then you've over optimized for efficiency and you're losing effectiveness. So that's what I'm finding in great BDMs. And I've heard that you're doing a great job in, and just that illustration is amazing. It's like you're balancing that efficiency and effectiveness constantly. I think that's what it takes to juggle a sizable pipeline. Would you agree?
yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that also there's ways that the automation drip has to appear. I've gone back and forth. Like, should that first, because obviously we're all busy, we're on calls all the time, we're maybe going out to meet somebody. So you can't just call somebody within the first 3 to 5 minutes. So how do I, should I make that first automated drip be seemingly automated so that the person, okay, they know that it's an automated email that comes through? Or should I try to make it seem like it's actually me? I've tried both of these extensively, and I've had way more luck with making them think that it's me. And so the various ways that I do that depends on the lead source. So for example, if you want to know how much your house is going to rent for, and you click on our rental analysis tool on the website, the lead's going to come in, and 5 minutes later, the first text goes out and says, hey, this is Shea, thanks for downloading the rental analysis tool. Let me know if you don't get it. That's what the first one says. And then instantly, there's no delay in time. It says, this is Shea with GC Realty BTW. And so it's this perception of, oh, they want to just make sure that I got the rental analysis. And this is actually somebody that's texting me. They said BTW, in my mind, that's how it works. Now, neither of those texts go out if I can get to them in the first 5 minutes. But if I don't, because I'm on another call or whatever, then I would say at a pretty high click rate, I'll get people to respond to that text. Then I know that there's a living, breathing prospect on the other side. And if they've already texted, it's like a subconscious buy-in to wanting to have a conversation, So that gives me like a lot of confidence on if I'm missing something, I know that the person's going to be taken care of, or at least think that I'm taking care of them on the other side. So
perfect. Thanks for elaborating. That was a great example of that. So we talked earlier in the call, and I really want to ask you about this. You were local, and now you're non-local, but you're still a local expert. You know a lot about the market. You spent a ton of time in that market. People know you in the market. I mean, I don't want to undersell this for anybody reading or listening. You were at events all the time. You were there. You have local relationships. I'm guessing somebody calls you now and they're like, hey, I need a lender for something, or a property appraiser or something. You're going to have that network. But physically, you're unable now to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'll meet you at the property in 20 minutes. So kind of walk us through what it's like when you were local versus now, and how you're adapting to make sure that you're not losing any effectiveness?
For sure. Yeah. When I was local, and you hit on it a little bit, it was very easy to not only build my own personal network for my own growth purposes, as well as the purposes of GC, but also if somebody calls and says, "Hey, can you come over to the property? I'm in town for the day from California. I'd love for you to get eyes on it." I could pick up the phone in the first 5 minutes, like we talked about, drive over to the property, and I immediately have first movers advantage and top of mind. And oh shit, these guys move fast. And it was definitely a competitive advantage for me. I think that in pivoting away from the market, it becomes more about managing expectations on the front end. And that doesn't necessarily mean like I'm not going to come to your property because I'm out of state. And people do this different ways. I personally try to keep the veil of I'm in Chicago or around Chicago, or in the office a lot. And then I try to kind of manipulate, might not be the right word, but paint the picture of it's not really me that you care about going to the property. It's the techs, it's the people that understand maintenance, it's the leasing team, the other people that would otherwise be going to the property anyway. And so that's how I get out of that part of it. From a networking perspective, it's really been just trying to strengthen the relationships that I already had from my time there. And then going out of my way to help prospective clients solve a problem if I don't already have an answer in my Rolodex for it.
Hmm.
So, if somebody calls and says, "Hey, what am I going to do once I move out with all my stuff if I'm getting deployed to Poland?" For me, it's like, okay, if I don't already have a moving and storage guy that's close to this part of the city that I can refer them, then I now need to go find several people that I can now hopefully add to my sheet, say, "Hey, I want to send you business. I'm trying to figure out ways to add value to you." And that creates a relationship over the phone in that way. So I try to continue building that network as much as I can while I'm there, um, as well as manage expectations for the prospective clients on the front end for things like, how much is my place worth? What do I need to do to get it ready? Oh, I just want you to see it because you kind of got to see how this window opens. There's a lot of questions like that can be answered by our techs, our leasing team, by Mark.
It's great. And so you did say you were going back, which I think is worth bringing up. So while you're remote, you're still taking business trips, right? You're still in the field. What do you do when you go back to Chicagoland?
So I always like to work from the office for a few days because I think that the relationship between the ops side of it and the sales and marketing side of it is really important, because I want those guys on the ops side to understand that I am trying to do everything in my power to bring the right kind of client on. And then usually I try to surround it with some kind of event, whether it's something that Mark's hosting or whether it's something that one of the other meetups that I would regularly participate in is going on. And then if I can, and there's an opportunity for it, I want to go meet potentially a big opportunity on site. So those are usually the three boxes that I'm trying to check when I go to Chicago. And that usually happens roughly every month, I would say, maybe every 2 months at most.
So you're going back every month or every other month?
Yeah,
Luckily, I mean, you're pretty close. So are you driving? Is that a flight?
I've been driving.
You've
Yeah.
been driving.
So yeah, it's not like, it takes probably 5.5 hours. It takes a lot less time when I don't have my baby with me. Um, so, I pop up there and hang out. I love hanging out with the people in the office. So
That's great. And yeah, the numbers keep rolling in. So thanks for sharing that. I think just something a lot of other people are curious about and are asking us about all the time. And I just want to point out, not that it wouldn't work, but it's very different that you had your first year in the market. Like you had that first year, like doing everything. And then it was probably more powerful for you then to separate yourself from day to day in the market versus starting from day to day in the market and trying to make up with just these monthly or quarterly business trips that may not have the same learning curve that you had. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And I think that if you are starting in a remote position, so there's obviously a lot of people in our industry that do work fully remote and do a really good job. I think of Brian Waters with RL. He lives in Florida. He sells for a company that's based in Columbus. I think that his take is usually trying to get that part of it out front early with the prospect so that there's no like, okay, can you come to the property? He wants them to know that sooner. But if you're going to do that, then you need to make sure that they understand that even though you're not there, you still understand the market, understand the value that a property manager can add, and can establish yourself as an industry expert, especially depending on the type of personality that you're talking to. I think that one of my competitive advantages in this space or in sales in general is trying to understand the type of person that I'm talking to really early. And if you can understand that, then you understand, I suppose, the level of expertise that you need to present, and also how much you need to manage that portion of the expectations. Hey, I'm not going to be able to go see it. Hey, the leasing team is going to be good enough to be able to get the rental analysis, and we'll get the techs out there for the maintenance side. So,
Well, I think it's an important distinction. You personally aren't going to see it, but your team will, right? So it's not that you've taken somebody's going to see the property off the table. It's just that you personally won't do it. And I think that it's easy for us to over focus on that. And instead of focusing on what can happen, focus on what can happen. So, hey, I'm not able to go, but the good thing is I've actually got the specialists who are really going to know how to value that property or tell you what you need to do to that property. They're going to do that, and I can schedule that for you, right? So it's just it's a reframe.
yeah, I think that it's because when somebody hears remote, they automatically think of outsourced, and property management and specifically real estate investing is very like geography, boots on the ground focus. And so
Yes.
they want to understand that even if you're not there, there are people there that are going to take care of you.
Yes, exactly. So, it's a great point because you're right. There's baggage around remote. Like people have assumptions. So, love to phrase that in a way where, so I'm only in the office once a month or every other month because I'm here in Columbus. I was there. I know the market well. But the good news is I've got people that really know how to, understand how to lease the property or how to maintain the property or how to renovate and repair the property. Like you immediately just you just like suck all that baggage out of the room when you put it that way. So
Well, totally. They want to believe, or they want to understand that the value that they're getting out of hiring somebody is that they know something or know how to solve problems better than they do. Otherwise, why are they hiring you in the first place? And so either you have to be able to help solve their problem directly, or you have to have close access to somebody who can. And so that's where the team on the ground obviously comes into play.
all right, I'm going to back up to something you said earlier because clearly we've shared that your company is a lead generation machine of varying levels of sales readiness. But
Mhm.
you said, oh, I also generate some leads. And so I wanted to ask, what do you do on a slow month? Because we all have it. So sometimes you're probably managing time and it's like, I've got too much to do. And other times you're like, hey, I've got not enough opportunity. What do you do when you have a slow month to generate your own opportunity?
Yeah, great question. The reality is, I call a ton of old leads. And I specifically try to filter for leads that came in roughly during the time that we're in. So if I'm having a slow September or October or whatever, I want to just filter to, okay, September, October of 2023, September, October of 2022, because my thought process is ideally they're, or in a realistic world, they're probably calling in because there's something at that, maybe a lease is coming up, or maybe they're about to move at that time of month, whatever. And I'll just hammer them. Like, a lot of my biggest correlation to doors closed is call volume. So I just try to record as many calls as I can, because the more people that I touch and can get on the phone with, probably the more doors that I'm going to close. So if I have a slow month in terms of leads coming in, then that means I have more time to make calls. And if I have more time to make calls, I'm going to stir up business either for this month or the following 3 months.
That's great. Great. Okay. So, any other tips you have? I mean, BDM coming in the market, you came in with no experience in property management. You came in with a ton of sales experience and clearly the ability to manage yourself. Obviously being in professional sports, like you eat what you kill, but you also don't even get to eat what you kill because it's just so hard. So I'm
Mhm.
sure the competitive nature is there. But for somebody who's like, hey, I'm gonna follow Shea's path. I'm gonna come in this, and I think there's opportunity here. I feel like I'm working for a good company. What are some of the things that you would share that have really worked for you, or things that didn't work for you that you're like, yeah, now that I'm in it, a couple of years, like I completely changed my mind on that.
Yeah, I think that time management is obviously a big part of it. And I think it's understanding the value of the different things that you do in the day, and understanding how you work. I think that there's some people that are good at flying by the seat of their pants, jumping on this, jumping on that, whatever. I like to try to get into like a flow state with whatever the activity that I'm doing is. So it gives me runway to get into a flow on whatever that thing is. So, like if I'm making calls, I'm trying to basically make calls for the next 2 hours straight, and whatever happens in that 2 hours happens. If I'm sending resource heavy emails where I'm trying to refer out a ton of, I'm going to put my headphones on and probably put on songs with no lyrics and just fire out just 50 emails that have a ton of resources in them to people that I'm trying to touch or stir up from a long, long time ago. And then the same thing with the onboarding items. Onboarding used to take up a ton of my time. But when I block it out on my calendar, like, hey, I'm just going to knock out, getting all the things that I need for this guy and then this guy and then this guy, then I don't have to be necessarily concerned about all the different things flying around in my head. It's like this time is used for this activity. This time is used for this activity. So I think that that's an important part of it. I also think being realistic with what you're actually doing with your time is important, because it's so easy to say, like, I don't have enough time in the day. But when you look at the most highly successful people, there's plenty of people out there that are doing a lot more with their time than I am. So either I'm an idiot, which I don't think that I am, or I could be being more true to myself and where my time is actually going. Maybe that's screen time on my phone, social media, yada, yada, yada. Maybe it's spending time with my family and I'm okay with that trade-off, but recognizing that I can't necessarily make as many sales if that's going on. So the level of expectation that I hold myself to needs to have some grace. So I think that that's what I would say. I think that the biggest thing, and I just hit on it earlier, but the more people that you can talk to, literally, that's all. Like the more people that you can talk to, the more business you're going to be able to stir up. I've tried to look at KPIs in a variety of different ways. Like how often are they getting touched in the CRM? How often, what is my speed to lead time? Where is the source coming from? How old is the lead? What type of property? What type of owner? Like there is no higher correlation than the amount of people that I'm talking to on the phone. So that's what I try to do. I mean, I quite literally try to talk to as many people as I can and record every single one of those calls so that I'm accountable to my own numbers that I'm keeping.
It reminds me of my number one principle of sales. Like no matter what technology's out there or what people are telling you to do, sales is just about getting in front enough of the right people at the right time and helping them make the right decisions, right? And so the order of that is very important. So it's about getting in front enough of the right people, which you're doing, at the right time. And that's the one thing we have no control over. So because we can't control that, we can control the ends. We can control how they make their decisions, and we can control getting in front of enough people. So therefore, we better be good at both and just wait for the magic to happen in the middle, right?
Well, totally. I mean, that's what if you optimize for the production rather than optimizing for the input, that the output versus the input,
Yeah.
then the inputs will be driven by the output. And so for me, when or if I find something that allows me to close more doors, then maybe I will pivot from making calls. But if I'm optimizing for doing tasks in my CRM, answering emails, whatever, then I'm not really optimizing for closing more doors. I think it's really easy to get caught up, especially when you have a heavy lead volume, of thinking, hey, I put in a good day's worth of work today. I completed 75 tasks in Lead Simple. I burned through, my email is clean. But if I didn't close any doors, then I didn't do a lot that day, because the only way that the company is growing or I'm getting paid is by closing more doors. And because of that, since I've come into the role, there's been a lot of things that I've done different than rent scale. I take a lot of things from rent scale as kind of the foundation or the basis for what I'm going to do. But then I'm A/B testing, like what works, what does not work, because I'm trying to find the thing that allows me to close more doors so that I can make more money. That's really the end goal.
Yeah, that's what we want you to be doing. And whatever worked in March may not work in, November or next March. Like that's the nature of the dynamic marketplace. Like unlike on any other role that we have in our companies, the ones that focus on people, especially on sales and prospects, there is a dynamic input that we can't control. So we pretty much can control like the SOP for managing a maintenance request or renewing a lease, and that's pretty much always going to be consistent. But when it comes to going out into the marketplace When I mean dynamic, new competitors are popping up all the time. Media is putting new ideas in our head. People have different expectations. The economy is changing. Like, it's such a dynamic marketplace. So I feel like that's what's going to make anybody good as a sales or marketing person, is that appetite for change and testing. And so we love that about you, Shea. I think you got that crushed. Like, that is the one thing that a lot of people getting into a sales role for the first time underappreciate, is the dynamics of the marketplace. We all, if you're the kind of person that says, just tell me what to do and I want to do it forever and I don't want to think about it, it's probably not a good role, because
Yeah. Well, and also, how do you learn? How do you learn if all you're doing is, this brings up the conversation of competence versus compliance. It's like, it's very hard to become more competent and understand better about what works if all I'm doing is complying to this one hard and fast, set of rules that's set forth by, anybody. I don't mean to say like a monkey could do it, but and a lot of people can walk in there and say, "Hey, Jeremy, give me a script, give me a set of onboarding instructions, and I'll just follow that." And I promise you that as things change in the market, or as different types of owners get on the phone, things are just not going to work as well as other things. So trying to understand how to build the competence and just hone the craft, I guess, is the best way I would say it.
Tell me, that was an awesome concept that I don't want to just gloss over. It was definitely going to change the direction of the conversation. Tell me what compliance first competence means to you.
Yeah, compliance means blindly following the rules, set forth without ever thinking about first principle of why is this rule the way that it is, and is it actually working, and is it optimizing for the type of output that I want. Competence means understanding what the rules or what the best practices seem to be, and then paying attention to why are those practices like that, and what if we did it this way. And I think that you gain competence the more that you test theories. I mean, that is what science, that's what the scientific method is in a lot of ways. And so to me, it comes down to like, yeah, I believe that rent scale, when I first come in, knows a lot more than I do about how to sell property management. They probably still do, but I'm not going to just blindly follow what they're telling me to do, because some people are responding well to this, some people are not. Maybe my market is different than what they know. Maybe the types of real estate investors or accidental landlords that we have around here are not receptive to this type of playbook. So I'm going to use that, that foundation, and try to gain an understanding for why things within that playbook work or maybe don't work.
Sorry, let me dig on that, because I love where you're going. So I think a lot of people are saying, hey, we know this works. You've said it already, just reaching out to people, talking to more people works. It can be easy for someone to use compliance first competence as cloud cover to say, oh, I spent 2 days trying to reach out to people. It's not working, right? And just immediately abandoning principles that we know work. So how do you measure it? Because I love that you talked about the scientific method. So how do you know when you're like, it's really time to make a change versus like, I'm just in my head and I'm using anecdotal evidence to like avoid pain?
Well, yeah, that's the last step of the scientific method, draw a conclusion. So, I mean, for sure, try something else. But if it's clear that the results are not producing, then maybe there's wisdom in, the playbook that came before you. I think that another part of it for me is I do a ton of reading sales books, listening to podcasts about property management, trying to understand through the relationships that I've developed in Scale Club and Rent Scale as a whole, to understand what is working for other people. And that's what allows me to modify. It doesn't mean I'm overhauling what I'm doing. It's just, oh, I like that. Let me take that tip and try it and see how people seem to respond to it. And over time, it's kind of like evolution versus revolution. Like, I want to slowly make changes that continue to strengthen my sales process and my sales pitch and the type of experience for the client before the sale and after the sale. Because from an even grander perspective, it's not just about what can I do to get them to sign the contract. It's about their success with GC Realty as a whole. Because if GC Realty is taken care of, then I'm going to be taken care of. So how do I optimize for all those things? Well, if I think about it at the beginning as, all right, I got to start from scratch here and overhaul everything and figure out a way to do this, I'm probably going to have a really hard time, and it's going to be too big of a problem, and I'm going to quit and go find another sales job. But if I could take this foundation, try to hone it, take the different pieces from Rent Scale, from Mark, from a book that I read, from a podcast that I listened to. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. eventually you get a sturdier and sturdier and sturdier presentation, pitch, experience, etc.
Fantastic. I think that when you said so you're like full of fortune cookies today. I love it. The evolution versus revolution is the yin to the yang of compliance versus competence. Because I do agree with you. I'm definitely a maverick. I always have been. But I also believe that too many people give up on things before they have statistical significance. Like they're not willing to, let's say we make 100 calls and we're hoping for a 20% conversion rate. Unfortunately, statistically, it doesn't happen often. You may have 80 calls that fail and then the next 20 work. It's still 80%, but how many people are going to give up after 19 calls? You know what I mean? So
For sure.
love that. And so that yin and yang of compliance versus competence and evolution versus revolution, you're not ready to throw out the whole thing. You're just like, okay, well, what can I do with these calls that are going to make them more effective? Or can I complement them with some LinkedIn connections? Or, can I start with LinkedIn and then I call them? Like, I love that idea, So
For sure. And it's also like understanding how to try to connect with the prospect more, like trying different things to do different things, even on that front end. You mentioned LinkedIn. Like I used to, before every call, I'm going to LinkedIn, I'm reading every single thing about this person. I'm going to their Facebook page, I'm trying to understand this. I'm looking up the property, what it'll rent for, the street that it's on, the different ordinances that I need to pay attention to. And you know what I found out? Those calls went pretty well, but I could make about a tenth of them as just picking up the phone and calling somebody. So it's like, and I think a lot of people in this seat feel like before they get on the call, they need to know everything about the property and the person and whatever. And all that does is create a bigger obstacle for you in actually making the calls in the first place. And like if you're talking to me on the phone and you can tell that I will be able to have resources to access to be able to solve your problems, but really it's just me and you trying to figure it out together. It's just such like a teamwork. We'll figure this out. Let's see what it looks like. I'll send you a ton of resources after this so that we understand what it looks like. And the more you do that, the more you learn things, like I am so much better on my feet and flying by the seat of my pants today than I was a year and a half ago because I jump into the call and just have the conversation and oh, that's something that I had never heard of.
yeah, and you got those reps, right? You got those reps in
Yeah, exactly.
like batting practice and everything else we do. Yeah, it's a universal truth. The more times you do something and the more you pay attention to how it goes, the better you get. And that's just so important in sales.
For sure.
Well, I want to kind of end on this idea. We've seen you be a great leader in the community of Scale Club. You've been in that community since you've been here. You've clearly taken ideas out of that, but you've brought ideas as well. Anything you want to share just on kind of masterminding with peers and why it's important for you to share what's working for you and how to get the most out of something like a community of like-minded people so that they can learn faster?
Definitely. I think that it's going into those meetings or those skill developments with the mentality of, well, I'm going to spend 45 minutes to an hour on this. So I would like to get something out of it. If I'm looking at it as checking a box going to a meeting, then I've already lost the hour. I mean, I might as well write it off. And also, the better that you get at something, the more passion, in my opinion, the better that you get at something, the more passion that you have around it. So the more that I pour into my weekly skill club team, the more I get to know those people, the more that I get to know those people, the more I tend to like them. And the more that I'm actually genuinely curious about how things are going with them and then how they do them. And so you create organic relationships and conversations that not only are I just like hanging out with people and chit chatting with people, but I also take a lot away from it. So I don't feel like, okay, I'm wasting an hour in the middle of my day. And from that, I've literally learned so much about the property management industry as a whole that allows me then to take ideas to GC. Or, hey, here's an idea that we're doing at GC that seems to be working. You guys should try this. Because it also allows me to further test my hypothesis with a whole bunch of other different companies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just feel like I want to get something out of it if I'm going to put the time into it. And then the same with skill dev. Like sometimes I literally look at those skill devs as an opportunity to get more comfortable speaking in front of people. Like, all right, I want to say something in this skill dev because the skill of being able to just jump on the Zoom and give my actual thoughts, I think is probably important in the long run. I'm not really sure what for, but that's just, like, what can I gain from spending this hour doing this thing?
Yeah, it's a universal skill. I think your instinct is right on. It's why people join Rotary or Toastmasters or go to church. Like, it's just like standing up and being a leader in your community is never a bad idea. So we love that you do that. But it also sounds like you're showing up with like a spirit of giving. Like you did kept saying, I want to make sure I take something away from this. But then you also said, I generally care about these people. I mean, if it was a pie chart, my guess is like you're showing up with like a spirit of giving. Like you're kind of 50%, maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I've watched you. You're like they're 50% to give and 50% to take. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I just like creatively solving problems. And I'm very people person-y by nature. So I like helping people. I get a rise out of somebody else succeeding and or somebody else buying my idea. And so there's a lot of that that goes into those. Well, it's also just affirmation of my own idea, right? So if I think, oh, you know what I'm going to do? This is an idea that I had a couple months ago that I was telling Reese about. Like, if I send invisible text to people on cold outreach from the jump, like what will that look like? And I tried it a few times. People got really weirded out. But it's not the point. That's not the point. The point is like trying something, bringing it to the club, seeing how other people react, seeing if I can get them to go out and try it too, just because we're all in this together and I'd like to see if this funny idea works. I don't know. It's entertainment. I think it's giving. I enjoy trying to sell stuff to other salespeople,
Mhm.
all the above.
It's definitely what I'm taking out of that. I mean, when you care about something genuinely, you want to be a part of a community who also cares about that. And I'm seeing you in Scale Club, and it's like the people who don't really want to get better, it's like a check a box meeting, like you said. The people who want to get better is like, okay, I have an opportunity to be around other people that are on the same journey as me. And that's why we join masterminds. That's why we join groups, social groups, family groups, professional groups. Like we're just trying to find like-minded people.
Totally.
So that was great. And you exemplify that, which is fantastic. Shea,
Wait, if you were going to move that upstream, I know you got to go. If you're going to move that upstream, why do you think some people are curious and some people view it as a checkbox?
great question. I think that appreciate getting interviewed on my interview. I think that overall, we're all very curious people in different ways. But then so we all have our interests. So it's like multidimensional. So like you and I are probably way more interested in sales than a lot of people. And we have found ourselves in this great industry. And so we're therefore much more interested in property management than most people. So there's like interest level, but then I think there's also curiosity level. And I know I'm just an insanely curious person. Like I hear a comment like soup to nuts. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I should like research what that means, right? I like literally
Mhm.
go online
Yeah.
and I'm like, I want to know like what that actually means.
Yeah.
And I heard something else today, fever pitch. Like I was listening to a podcast this morning on my workout and they mentioned fever pitch. And I'm like, that clearly means something. Like I want to actually know what that means so that when I talk about it, and I haven't looked it up yet. So let me know if you know that answer to that. But it's like I'm just an insanely curious person overall. But then I'm way more curious about certain things than other things. Like,
Mhm.
so I think that why is it that I think that in general, in some areas of life, us, all of us included, we're looking for minimum level effort required to get by. We're looking for pass fail. And
Mhm.
other areas of our life, we're looking for mastery. And I think everybody has that. But then within that, the multi-dimension is, I think that you and I are just looking for mastery in more areas than most people. And a lot of other people might be looking for more pass fail in other areas. So I think that's it. I think it's just, are you interested in the concept? Because that's going to bring the best out of you. And are you the kind of person who's more pass fail or mastery level?
Yeah. Interesting.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that the curiosity comes from, like, I just think we tend to do things that we feel like we're good at, and we tend to be a part of a tribe.
Yeah.
And so if we've been doing it for a while and we are highly successful in the world of sales, how can I overlay sales onto everything? And then any conversation that I get on, I'm already good at this. So I like talking to other people who are also good at it. And then because I like the tribe mentality, I like talking about it with other people who like to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then if we all like to talk about it, and I'm also competitive, and I also like learning about sales, then what are some other things that these people who are a part of my tribe and enjoy talking about the things that I like talking about, what are they doing? You know? So I think to me, that's where it comes from. It's the same reason, like if somebody wants to start talking technically about baseball, it's like, oh, I'll get into a technical baseball conversation all the time because it's something that I know about, it's something that I'm good at, you know? So I think to me, that's where it comes from. That's Scott Galloway talks a lot about that in his books, but I
I'm a
love
big
it.
fan of Scott Galloway. I was just talking to Jen last week about that, about, she's got 2 young boys. I'm like, you got to start reading some Scott Galloway and turning them on to them because he's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And that note too, like you just talked about technical base, like when you really like the quality of a conversation, when you really know something about it is so different than a surface level conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, I'm sure
Totally.
like your understanding of like diagnosing a bad swing would be so much different than mine because
Yeah.
I didn't even play Little League growing up. I played in some softball leagues, you know what I mean? And I'm just like,
Sure.
hit the ball as hard as you can, like brute force, right? And
Yeah.
you would have an entire vocabulary about a swing that I wouldn't even know what that meant, right? And so that is satisfying to get geeky and to get,
Totally.
deep
Yeah.
with somebody about something. So I love that.
Totally.
All right, just as we kind of sign off here, I really appreciate this, Shay. I've had such a good time and
Yeah.
love seeing you.
Same.
Yeah. What's next? What are you excited about? Anything on the horizon? Just more mastery or, anything new you're kind of thinking of that you're excited about on your journey?
Yeah. I'm excited to see how I can kind of overlay what I'm learning in the real estate investment space and take it to my own personal life and try to expand my own portfolio. For me, a big part of like originally getting into it, listening to these podcasts, is how can I create generational wealth for my family? For all of the real estate investment buzzwords, financial freedom, yada yada yada. But in the process of that, I've jumped into an industry where with that now I've gotten extremely invested in and emotionally invested in, yada yada yada. So I think that what I'm excited about is more ways to creatively solve people's problems and how to really communicate how to solve those problems. Learning myself about property management and real estate investing and how to optimize that side of it. Um, and then just continuing to grow and close more doors and learn about sales techniques, really.
Great stuff.
And
Well,
don't tell my wife I didn't say anything about my family. I have a lot I want to do with that stuff too.
this is definitely about, yeah, this is definitely about sales. It's a magazine
Yeah.
article. We don't have room for everything, but I totally appreciate that. And I know that I know that that is a big driver for you. And we've watched that as you've grown. You've made professional decisions around how to support your family and how to create the best life. And we're excited. We're excited to see what's next for you. And we appreciate you. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. And I appreciate everything Rent Scale has done for me and for GC and just the community in general. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.